perched atop a remote, windswept cliff overlooking a churning gray sea. The Moonlight Hotel was once the pinnacle of early 20th century glamour, a lavish retreat for the wealthy and influential. Its grand halls, opulent suites, and crystal chandeliers were legendary, symbols of an era defined by excess and elegance. However, its reputation as a haven of luxury was irrevocably shattered one fateful stormy night in the 1920s. As thunder cracked and lightning split the sky, a strange and inexplicable event occurred. Every single guest, from the aristocrats in the penthouse to the bellhops in the lobby, vanished without a single solitary trace. The hotel was found eerily silent the next morning, a ghost ship marooned on land, its rooms left as if their occupants had merely stepped away for a moment. Ever since that night, whispers of a curse have clung to its decaying walls, turning the once glorious structure into a monument of fear and morbid curiosity. A century later, drawn by these chilling legends and the promise of capturing undeniable proof of the paranormal, four thrill-seeking friends arrive at the hotel's rusted, imposing gates. Andy, the pragmatic leader and cameraman, was determined to document everything. Mike, the group's skeptic, armed himself with scientific equipment, ready to debunk any spooky occurrences. Kai, a history enthusiast, was fascinated by the hotel's dark past and hoped to uncover the truth behind the mass disappearance. And Lily, a sensitive soul with a keen intuition for the unseen, felt an unnerving dread the moment she stepped onto the property. Their goal was simple: spend a night inside the infamous Moonlight Hotel and film a documentary that would launch their online paranormal investigation channel into stardom. The crumbling facade and shattered windows did little to dampen their initial excitement. To them, it was the perfect setting for an unforgettable adventure. As they pushed open the heavy, creaking doors and stepped into the cavernous lobby, a thick layer of dust danced in the beams of their flashlights. The air was heavy, cold, and stagnant, carrying the faint, musty scent of decay and long-extinguished cigars. At first, the atmosphere was more thrilling than terrifying. They explored the grand ballroom, where a dusty grand piano stood silently on a stage, and they marveled at the antique mirrors lining the hallways, their silvered surfaces clouded with age. The hotel felt like a perfectly preserved time capsule. In one of the suites, they found a scene frozen in time. A half-empty glass of amber liquid sat on a nightstand. An open suitcase lay on the bed with clothes neatly folded inside, and a fine wool coat was draped over the back of a velvet armchair. It was as if the occupants from 100 years ago had just stepped out and would be returning at any moment. The initial thrill of exploration slowly began to curdle into a creeping sense of unease. The silence was too profound, too absolute. As dusk settled, casting long, distorted shadows across the decaying opulence, the hotel began to reveal its true, menacing nature. The grand piano in the ballroom, which they had confirmed was untouched and silent, suddenly began to play a slow, melancholic tune. The melody, dissonant and sorrowful, echoed through the empty halls, each note dripping with a palpable sense of loss. Rushing back, they found the room empty, the music ceasing the moment their lights hit the piano. Later, while filming in a hallway, Lily gasped and pointed at one of the antique mirrors. For a fleeting second, her reflection had moved independently, turning its head to stare back at her with hollow eyes before snapping back into place. Mike tried to dismiss it as a trick of the light, but even his scientific resolve was beginning to waver. The hotel was no longer just a backdrop for their film. It felt alive, aware, and deeply hostile. The sense of being watched was overwhelming, a suffocating pressure that followed them from room to room. The true terror began around midnight. After a tense argument about whether to stay or leave, the group decided to get some rest in separate rooms on the main floor, hoping to regroup in the morning. Andy set up his camera on a tripod, pointing it at his bed to capture any potential nocturnal activity. He lay down, exhausted, and soon fell into a troubled sleep. When the others tried to wake him an hour later, they found his room empty. The bed was cold, his belongings were untouched, but Andy was gone. Panic set in as they reviewed the footage on his camera. The recording showed Andy sleeping peacefully for several minutes before a tall, indistinct shadow slowly materialized from the corner of the room. It glided silently toward the bed, its form contorting and darkening until it stood directly over him. The camera feed then glitched violently and cut to static, leaving his final moments a horrifying mystery. Frantic and terrified, Mike, Kai, and Lily realized they were no longer just visitors, they were prisoners. Every attempt to escape proved futile. They would run down a long corridor and burst through a set of double doors, only to find themselves standing right back in the same hallway where they had started. The doors they just came through now vanished. They tried smashing windows, but the glass was unnaturally resilient, refusing to crack or break, as if reinforced by some unseen power. The hotel had trapped them in a terrifying spatial loop, a maddening labyrinth from which there was no exit. The realization that they were being toyed with, herded like mice in a maze by a malevolent, invisible force, was more terrifying than any ghost. Their adventure had morphed into a desperate struggle for survival. Driven by a desperate hope to find a clue, Kai frantically searched the hotel's reception area. There, under a thick layer of grime on the mahogany front desk, he found the original guest ledger. Its leather cover was cracked and brittle with age. As he blew the dust off its pages, a chilling discovery made his blood run cold. Near the end of the book, an elegant, looping cursive that looked eerily fresh, were their own names: Andy, Mike, Kai, and Lily. It was as if the hotel itself had pre-registered their arrival, checking them in for an eternal stay. This wasn't just a haunting. It was a trap that had been set for them, a predetermined fate they had walked right into. The hotel wasn't just haunted by its past guests, it was actively collecting new ones. In a final, desperate act of defiance, Mike grabbed the ledger, believing it to be the source of the curse. He declared that if they couldn't escape the hotel, they could at least try to break its power. He doused the ancient book with lighter fluid and struck a match. As the flames erupted, consuming the brittle pages and their inscribed names, a collective, ethereal sigh echoed through the entire building, but their relief was short-lived. Instead of breaking the curse, the act of burning the ledger seemed to tear a hole between worlds. From the walls, the floors, and the very air around them, hundreds of pale, translucent faces began to materialize. Men, women, and children, all dressed in the fashion of the 1920s, their expressions vacant and silent, their eyes filled with a hollow emptiness. They formed a silent, suffocating circle around the three terrified survivors. The apparitions didn't move or make a sound. They simply stood and stared, their presence an overwhelming wave of cold and despair. As the last page of the ledger turned to ash, the hotel's remaining lights flickered violently one last time, and then died, plunging them into absolute, impenetrable darkness, surrounded by the silent ghosts of the Moonlight Hotel.